Hello and welcome to the Expanse. I'm the Quack and I hope you're having a less quack day than myself. Today we're going to be talking about the Jailer spoilers, and before I begin I need to preface a few things. Firstly, no, I'm not happy this was leaked. Why? Leave enough comments asking and I'll get around to making content answering why I'm not happy and why I'm still making content on it. Secondly, despite being unhappy the image was leaked, what's probably more annoying for me is the downplaying of the image. So just to be clear, yes, this is a very big reveal when it comes to the lore of World of Warcraft. As in, it's almost as big, if not bigger, than the Jailer being a thing in the first place. It basically tells us one of the hinted species in World of Warcraft is definitely a thing, and not a coincidence. And also tells us they are most likely the undisputed god species of the World of Warcraft universe. I'll be explaining that in today's content. And where I know I make speculative content, after seeing what the Jailer looks like, I am arrogant enough to say this content will contain spoilers. And once again, this content will contain spoilers. So if you would like to keep the mystery of who the Jailer is and what is probably coming after Shadowlands until the day we are supposed to find out, in about give or take 3 to 9 months, if not longer, do not continue watching. And I mean it. As in, close the video right now and walk away. Okay, so now that I've just dug my hole, who is the Jailer? First thing I'm going to say is, I know the Jailer's look heavily implies he's related to the Titans, and I do agree with this specific perspective. However, I do not think he's supposed to be the equivalent of the IRL Hades. But, to entertain that idea for the briefest of time, if the Jailer is Hades, the Maw is Tartarus. If the Maw is Tartarus, then following the lore beats we've been presented in game, then similar to the IRL Tartarus, the Maw was most likely the prison of the Titans. Meaning yes, the Titans in game are most likely equal equivalents to their IRL counterparts, with a few tweaks to fit WoW's lore. This would also most likely mean most, if not all, the Titans were in the Maw at some point and escaped. It would also mean that there are a lot more Titans out there other than just the Pantheon, and it would also mean that we might have IRL Pantheon equivalents, aka the children of the Titans like Zeus, floating around in the universe. There would also be the implication that the physical universe was created by a clash of gods in an event probably inspired by the Titanomachi. That's if the Jailer is Hades, which I don't think he is. Why? Because I still believe Blizz when they said the Jailer is basically the cosmic boogeyman, considered a legend by elder races and older than most things in the universe. The reason I believe this, and why it alters my opinion, is because that description implies the Jailer's IRL equivalent is a primordial, not a Titan or an Olympian. If you don't know what a primordial is, to grossly oversimplify what they are the gods before gods. They are the primal forces the IRL Titans and Olympians feared. Examples of primordials are Chaos, as in the chaos that started the universe, Nyx, the embodiment of the night sky, and Cronus, not the Titan, and spelt with a CH, primordial of empirical time, with his consort Anarche, primordial of inevitability, and next to them Aeon, primordial of unbound time. These are just some of the primordials and they are ridiculously powerful. With the information provided so far, it's highly likely the Jailer is equivalent to one of these ridiculously overpowered primordials. However, considering the abundance of possibilities around what got the Jailer locked up, he basically could be any of them. With that said, considering the theme of the expansion, the likely primordials the Jailer could be based off of is either Tartarus or Erebus. And yes, Tartarus is not only considered a place, but a deity that yes, still had the ability to contain the Titans. And that isn't mentioning Erebus, who in most cases is literally considered the personification of darkness. However, depending on what text you're looking at, fits the description of Tartarus or Hades, and the same goes for the other two. All three gods at some point or another are equated to being the underworld, being certain locations in the underworld, or a deity within the underworld. The probable breakdown of how this works in game is Hades is the Shadowlands, Tartarus is the Maw, and Erebus is the Jailer, or vice versa when it comes to Tartarus and Erebus. What does this mean? Well, firstly, we're screwed. As in, if you thought we were going to lose against the old gods, yeah, it was definitely possible, but when it comes to this type of power, we should have no chance. If the Jailer is unleashed, unless another primordial steps in, or we get the universe to work together, we are not winning against him. And yes, I did casually just mention other primordials. Why? Well, half the reason I'm convinced this is a thing in the first place is because other primordials have already been hinted at ages ago. Aether, Upper Air, or the Air of the Gods, is referenced in Blade's Edge Mountain in the Burning Crusade. The Tauran Skyfather is most likely a reference to Uranus, father of the Titans and progenitor to a ridiculous amount of Greek gods and monsters, and most recently, the dark side of the moon is excessively reminiscent of Nyx. Oh, and here's a fun fact. Nyx and Erebus were consorts to each other, and had quite a few interesting children that I would highly suggest looking up. To also be clear, these connections would have never been made if the Jailer didn't look like a Titan. At best, this would have been wild speculation. Now, however, we're at the point of what other primordials could there be instead of are they actually a thing, which is a massive leap. Now, with the image of the Jailer reinforcing a connection to the Titans, and this talk of primordials being a thing in World of Warcraft, we now get onto the biggest lore reveal of the Jailer's identity. The reveal that Celestials, or Astrals, I'm just going to go with Celestials, are pretty much a confirmed thing, and are quite possibly the creators of the universe. What are Celestials? Basically think Constellars, Titans, August Celestials, the Jailer, most likely the Arbiter, and considering what we've seen Elune do, probably her as well. I know that's a wide variety of creatures, but bear with me. When we go to Argus, we see the Titans in two celestial forms. One form is a ball of stars, the other is a humanoid form. Now, because the origins of the Titans is known but still rather mysterious, and the Constellars are not attached to it, trying to say they are the same species was far-fetched. Trying to say any of the celestial creatures were related to each other was far-fetched. Even when Argus seemingly calls in his own Constellars, you could have argued it was just an in-game mechanic to fill in the fight, as Blizz wanted to make the Mythic phase special. With the reveal of the Jailer and his obvious relation to the Titans, and him being older than the Titans, there's no dice anymore. The implication is we were probably looking at a lineage / species / some form of ancestry which eventually resulted in the mortal races. Why am I so certain? Because Ulduar basically forced this stuff in our face, Pandaria confirmed it, Legion further reinforced it, and the literal explanation seems to have been coming with the Jailer and Shadowlands. In Ulduar, there are certain places that have constellations that directly mimic the mortal races of Azeroth. Yet, if Ulduar had been basically out of commission since Loken had taken over the facility, the question is, why are these constellations here? They're not Titanforge designs to our knowledge, so what's the deal? The answer at this point seems rather obvious. Those constellations are the templates for the mortal races of Azeroth, most likely created by the Titans from other constellations. The proof of that is literally stamped on the forges. Within Ulduar, we see these glass panels that have 12 IRL constellations on them, and they specifically appear in the major forge sections of Ulduar. There was never a real connection between these constellations and the statues until Pandaria, where you literally see the August Celestials being used to create Elgalon, a celestial dragon lacking what seems to be a soul, and it just happens to be fixed to the engine of Nalek Shah, a place that was literally used to create mortals, meaning the Titans had or still have the ability to shape these constellations. The implication here is those constellations on the Ulduar discs were used in the creation of the mortal races we see lining Ulduar. Here's where things get interesting though. If the Mogu were using August Celestials to create a celestial dragon in TOT, what are the August Celestials? This is where Legion comes in. Legion showed us powerful Celestials can take a part of a creature's soul and turn it into a celestial form, hence what happened to Ysera. It also showed us that reverse Titan forging is a thing, as in you can take existing creatures and Titan forge them, and with Argus, showed us that not all Constellars are bound to the Pantheon, and are instead seemingly bound to a Titan, who does seem to have control over their actions whether they want to or not, as was demonstrated expansions earlier with Algalon and his laments back in Ulduar. It should also be noted, the heroic fight goes out of its way to show that where at first glance constellas may seem similar, there are differences that make them unique, as seen through their weaknesses to certain forms of damage. On top of this, we know the Titans are far from benevolent creatures. Then, to give the icing on the cake, we have the Shadowlands, which basically confirms the August Celestials weren't just a one-off. As in, there are existing templates that have been used to create life, and can be fundamentally altered within the Shadowlands, hence the existence of the 4 distinct zones that can alter a creature's soul and form. So, instead of those constellations being created by the Titans, what if, sticking to what Ulduar was, they were instead imprisoned by them? Altered, maybe. Maybe experimented on using the other constellations the Titans considered prudent, or possibly captured on their tour of the universe. Or worse yet, maybe those statues are just stasis prisons where the prisoner is conscious in stasis, or trophies. Maybe, just maybe, those constellations were Azeroth's naturally occurring constella designates, created from her own celestial form, as it's hopefully become quite obvious there are variations within the constellas. Now, how does the Jailer come into all of this? Well, if the Jailer is on par with the Primordial, and is a higher form of Celestial than the Titans, then the Titans could quite arguably be the Jailer's equivalent of Constellas, which, ironically enough, would explain another facet of the cosmology map. Each magic on the cosmology map has its own little world and depiction of space. Initially, I thought they were just reflections of what reality would look like under that magic. Now I'm more convinced each represents that magic's overarching celestial primordial or primordials, who would have control of any celestial lesser than them under that magic, like the Titans or other possible celestials. I mean, you know how Khadgar theorized the Naru were created by a loon? What if he was close? What if a loon or the moons are, or are closely related to, one of the primordial celestials, while the Naru are related to another? This theory would also imply the same about the Void Lords, as in, they may be in fact a form of celestial. How does all this come back to the mortal races? Well, as I said, those templates in Ulduar could have been the foundations of life on Azeroth. And if you remember, when we stepped on the discs to fight Elgalon and Algalon, we were shown our constellation, meaning this possible influence from a Titan or a Primordial that the Constellas have demonstrated may affect us as well. And that's not mentioning the fact Aman'Thul called us the children of Azeroth. Within the context of this theory, that is not by coincidence. There's also the question of whether Azeroth is actually a Titan or a Primordial Celestial, and I only bring that up because of what happened with the Titans. The Titans died, and it's said through unknown magic they managed to sustain their essence. These essences then found suitable forms, the Keepers in the Titans' case, and infused their bodies with power and memories. However, as it came, it also disappeared. Lingering bits of power remained, however, more importantly, the memories disappeared. What if that's what happened to Azeroth? What if World of Warcraft had its own version of the Titanomachy, a war of gods and their powerful followers, that may have seen the end of everything, and the creation of the physical universe? Yet, similar to the Titans, none of them actually died. And so Azeroth, similar to many of the other celestial casualties of the war, survived, but lost her memory, forgetting the conflict altogether. However, unlike the others, she may have been a primordial, and unlike the others, she managed to retain most of her power. While on the other hand, you have titans like Argus, who only remember as far back as their travels through the physical universe, while others, like the Pantheon, didn't remember anything. And then there's the Jailer, who may have been locked away before the war finished and never forgot, and managed to retain its power. And just to be that broken record, you can figure all of this out from one image. I know I sound arrogant and crazy, but a lot of WoW's lore is a massive game of connect the dots, with future lore being a game of blind connect the dots. The image of the jailer, for the most part, makes the blindfold see-through. And the reason why I find this theory so convincing, I might add, is similar to the true enemy of all theory, which I genuinely thought was a fringe theory until Shadowlands came out. It answers one or two things, but it also expands the lore of World of Warcraft tenfold, creating a multitude of new story possibilities while using old and established lore to keep these possibilities grounded within World of Warcraft. So much so, I'd be willing to bet we weren't meant to see the jailer until a lot later in the expansion, as in at 9.1 or 9.2, because these possibilities and questions that come from the jailer's reveal basically eclipse any lore we're going to learn at the start of Shadowlands, as all of it's probably going to be the build up to this reveal, which sets up a ridiculous amount of new and possible expansions to come in the future. Okay, now that I've finished digging my grave and filling it in, I'll finish this theory on 2 points. Firstly, there is one other theory the jailer may confirm. However, I cannot and will not talk about it until the person who came up with that theory and suggested it to me finishes their work on it before I release mine. Safe to say though, look out for it because it's a really good one. And secondly, in the end, we are all wrought from stardust. That is an actual quote from some in-game flavor text, and yes, I know it's from a battle pet, but battle pet lore is relevant, and a completely different can of worms on the list of content I need to make. Also, as like a quick update, I am still working on what I called the Nathrazine conspiracy. It just ended up being a lot longer than I expected, but that is coming in the near future. Thank you for watching.